to tie something into what we were studying last time, which was spiritual health. And this may not, you might not recognize right off the bat that I'm going to tie this into spiritual health, but you'll see it right at the last. I'm going to go over some information that has to do with how we as a society and we as a country have declined over the years, and it's going to be just factual information that will help you understand the conclusion that I'm going to come to at the end of what I'm going to give you here, and that will tie it into what we were talking about as far as spiritual health is concerned. Mao Zedong, the communist founder of the People's Republic of China, killed a staggering 45 million Chinese peasants during his famed Great Leap Forward starting in 1958, making him hands down the biggest mass murderer in the world today. Yet Barack Obama's White House Communications Director, Anita Dunn, publicly bragged that Mao was one of her favorite political philosophers. How could that be? Just 3 weeks after our previous president's inauguration in January of 2009, this was the cover on Newsweek. Let's see, I'm going to have to make this a little smaller to get it on. It was 3 weeks, it was actually the actual date was January of 2009, 3 weeks after the inauguration of our previous president. And this is the cover of that Newsweek magazine. We are all socialists now, and you have a red hand and a blue hand shaking hands. And it says the perils and promises of a new era of big government. This was our Newsweek magazine at that time, 2009. Of course, long before Obama's presidency, America's Judeo-Christian culture had been under attack with patriotism. This is what was under attack. Patriotism, traditional morality, and strong family units replaced by sexual liberation, disintegrating families, easy divorce, and a culture drenched in extreme violence and graphic sex. It's that way now, but it didn't get there overnight. It took it a while to do that. What we have, I'm condensing a lot of things that I read, is that in World War II, and then in the Cold War, you had the Nazis, and then you had communism, and they would go in and they would just frontal attack, and they would try to change things overnight as far as taking over a country, and then they would change the culture. But that changed. What they decided to do, instead of trying to do that to the United States because they didn't think they would be successful in defeating us militarily, they decided that what they would do is change the culture, and then the goals that they wanted to achieve would just drop right in their lap. And see, that would take time. It took patience to do it. And so over a long period of time, in fact, we can go all the way back to 1914 with Woodrow Wilson was president then. This is when they didn't call it this then, but when progressive ideas really started gaining traction. And during that time, to us, let me put it this way, to us, what they were doing would be hardly noticeable. But that was at a different era, a different time. And they did it incrementally, and they started doing things. And then you had Teddy Roosevelt and Franklin D. Roosevelt that expanded that even to a much larger degree, this progressive thinking. And we had that was called the New Deal. And it was new, all right, but it wasn't much of a deal. And during this time, people's thinking towards government was changing, but also towards tradition and the morality, at this time it was changing slower. It wasn't until the 1960s when it really caught on fire, and everything was topsy-turvy at that time. And so you had Lyndon Johnson and the Great Society, and both of those, by the way, are misnomers. What Franklin Delano Roosevelt did wasn't a new deal. It's nothing new under the sun. It's been done before. And Lyndon's Johnson's society was anything but great. All the things that he had tried to do by force of the government has been undone now. There was literally trillions of dollars spent in the racial integration issues. They were busing people at great expense. They had all these great, big, huge government housing, and it was a colossal failure. And they finally just had to tear down all of these government housing that were nothing but drug-infested dens of iniquity. And with the busing, that didn't work either. So, but things were changing. And if you lived in the 60s, you will know that they really started rapidly changing at that time. That's when the drugs came in. That was during the Vietnam War. That's when you had a racial unrest. So much was happening at the same time then. And the changes then are being felt now because the hippies of that era, many of them now are in academia. Many of them are judges, and they haven't changed their mindset. This progressivism is continuing with us even today, only now they have positions of power, and we are getting a bigger dose of change when it comes to progressivism, to the point to where you can't hardly recognize our country anymore. Marxism is ferociously metastasizing across America in virtually every college campus, large and small. And our schools and university are hotbeds of socialism. I have a few bullet points to go over this, and I'm not telling you anything new. I know you know this, but most students now believe that what they call hate speech is not covered by the First Amendment. And it couldn't be more the opposite. The First Amendment is there for hate speech or any other kind of speech that you can think of. We are seeing that they are limiting the freedom of speech. In a lot of cases, they don't even consider it a right, a God-given right. These students seek safe zones to protect them from the people who have differing opinions. Well, this has never happened before. When someone has a differing opinion, well, you have to seek a safe zone because, according to them, dialogue, verbiage, discussing something can be harmful to you. These are the ones that were so tolerant. These are the ones that were preaching toleration in the 60s, and now toleration has been shut down. They no longer wish to debate differing beliefs, rather they use violence to prohibit others from exercising their freedom of speech. So we're talking about the most fundamental, basic rights we have, which is the freedom of speech, and also, of course, the freedom of religion. That's just off the charts. That's not even to be considered. If you say anything of a religious nature, then you are castigated, mocked, and just ignored. American children are being conditioned at public school to reject their parents' social and moral beliefs as being racist, sexist, and homophobic, and conditioned to embrace immorality. That's what's happening in our public schools today. Phyllis Schlafly, in her definitive book, Who Killed the American Family, says the American family was destroyed by a combination of political activists, judges, economic theorists, self-proclaimed experts, and left-wing politicians, all guided by the utopian philosophies of the progressive left. Their goal is to break down the American family, destroy parental authority, deny right and wrong, reduce family autonomy, and get as many people as possible dependent on the government programs. Now, I read that kind of fast because there's a lot in it. But what I'm telling you is everything that have been the stalwart, the anchor, the foundation of this country is all but gone. And I'm telling you how it happened. Most young people are big supporters of the LGBT movement, same-sex marriage, co-eds sharing dorm rooms, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, removal of Confederate monuments, and socialism, but they ferociously reject anything Christian. All those other things they are for, but anything that smacks of Christianity, they don't want to hear it. Bernie Sanders, an openly avowed socialist, came close to winning the presidential nomination mainly because of the support of young people. Now, what I'm telling you is just what has happened over a period of time in our education system. But you know how bad it is. Indeed, virtually all of America's major institutions from Hollywood. Did any of you see anything of the Emmys? I hope you didn't. It would make you nauseated. The Emmys, the Grammys, the Oscars, late night talk shows are all the president, and anything that is moral, anything that is Christian is fair game for them. And they're losing viewers, but they don't care. They are on a mission, and their mission is to attack anything that they see as an obstacle to have this Shangri-La of freedom, which is nothing but slavery, and they don't know it. So every institution, every major institution, Hollywood, also our nauseating, disgusting news media. I don't watch late show talk shows anymore. I did when I used to enjoy Johnny Carson, but not now. And they just roast anything that is decent anymore, and it's all totally political. Also sports, the NFL, the NBA, the NCAA, the ESPN, all of them are very pro-LGBT, homosexuals, and anything that is extremely left, they're for it. And they're paying the price as well, because people don't want to go to football games and see their flag insulted by these prima donnas that make tens of millions of dollars, and yet they are oppressed. Did any of y'all see, I think it was on yesterday, the Little League football team, and the coaches had all the little boys, they're about 8 years old, down on one knee while they were playing the Star Spangled Banner. Yeah, I saw it. And these little 8-year-old boys, they don't know why they're doing it, but they will remember that when you hear the national anthem, it's a time to get down on your knee and protest. Supposedly because they have it so hard, so they're so oppressed. Now, they had phenomenal uniforms, and they were playing in a phenomenal stadium, and yet they're so oppressed. It's just so sad that, and it's really the coaches and it's the parents that should deal with that. Also, big corporations, Google, PayPal, Target, all of them. Remember when we had the horrible abomination of the Supreme Court saying that same-sex marriage is a constitutional right? Remember when we had that? And I think I had 50 PowerPoints of the advertisements right after that, and every one of these corporations, big corporations, I don't even think you can name one that wasn't in on it, were just praising and lauding what a phenomenal decision that was, and love is love. No matter what you do, love is love. Anyway, you understand what's going on there. Most politicians, the deep state traitors who betray their country for political reasons, and even many churchings and their hirelings. I'm calling them hirelings because they're not pastors. They're hirelings, have been profoundly infiltrated and transformed by the far left. How can this be? Now, a lot of this, I don't have quotations in here because most of this is a hodgepodge between some quotes, and most of it's what I have just put together here. And now I'm going to bring it to a conclusion in the last few paragraphs and connect it to spiritual health. Here's a quote from WND, the chilling left on the brink of socialist victory. This one quote: "We're already socialists. Right now we have 47% of the people living off the government." When you've got that many people dependent, guess what? They continue to want more and more. And this is what the previous administration did. They tried everything in their power to get government bigger and more people dependent on them so they could control them. A worldwide overturning of values cannot take place without the annihilation of the old values and the creation of new ones. Just think how much has changed over the past 25 or 30 years. So what have we witnessed? We've been witnessing the old values being changed over to new, I can't even call them values. I would say into new, the new values are gone, and I don't think there's new, the old values are gone, and I don't think there's new values. I think there's just, abomination, just nothing but decadence. But it goes back further than that, and I told you about the President Wilson and Woodrow Wilson and so forth. Now here's the last paragraph and why I did all this, because I want you to understand this. The point is, change came in slowly, incrementally, and subtly. This is the same way that spiritual degeneration occurs. We need to be extremely vigilant to keep from being lulled into letting our guard down. We must nip in the bud any signs of spiritual lethargy if we intend to be overcomers in the devil's world. And I did all that to come to this last paragraph because there is a very close connection between what I have given you over our country and where we are today and believers who have not been vigilant, and they've allowed the environment and those in it and all the evil that is in this world to penetrate, because they weren't, when they first started sliding down that slippery slope of I'll be all right, I don't need to get doctrine every day, I know enough, I can get by, I'm just fine. That is spiritual lethargy. Every single day, it's like we're hanging on by our fingernails. We are in the concentrated stage of the angelic conflict. And evil is all around us. There is decadence. And it's like being in a sewer and thinking, this is fine. You don't smell it because you're used to it. We can't be that way. And every time in our own souls that we start giving excuses and reasons why we don't have to be very vigilant, that we have to not let down in our prayer life. We can't think that we can go even one day without nourishing our soul with doctrine. Even when we don't have class, you can go to the notes, you can go to YouTube, there's all those things. If nothing else, just pick up the Bible and start reading it. Do something to nourish your soul with truth every single day, because if you don't, we live in a time to where it won't take long, it won't take many decisions on our behalf, on our part, to make excuses why we don't have to be vigilant, and before we know it, we're part of the problem. And so that's how I ended our spiritual health. Remember, we went through physical health, and we went through mental health and then spiritual health. Now we're starting here in lesson 29. This is today's date, and we're starting today on business and employment. Remember, all these different areas. So far we've gone over religion, politics, government, marriage, family, friends, health, and now business employment. And I'm only taking probably less than a third in this review of what the discernment series was about. So I've tried to get just the most important points and not do it in a way that the continuity of thought was gone. So here we go in business and in employment. God ordained work as the normal routine of living. Every legitimate human task, therefore, is of intrinsic worth, however menial it may seem, and is potentially a means of glorifying God, even if it's menial. Because God ordained work as the normal routine for living. And I'm so glad He did. Most people, I shouldn't say most, at least there's a number of people that don't want to work. They rather just sit around and have someone be a servant and take care of all their wants and needs. And there's some people that live that way, but it's not a very good way to live for a Christian, because we are servants. And what do servants do? Servants work. And we have the perfect master. We have the perfect employer. And we're going to see that work is an asset. It's a blessing. It's not something that we should want to avoid. So even if you have a menial task, I know that when I was at A&M, Texas A&M, and if you were in the Corps, and I was in the Corps, but not I was an athlete, so I didn't go through all the regimen that most of the Corps guys did. But if you did something that was against the protocol, then you would be very possibly given some menial work to do. It could be cleaning the toilets with a toothbrush. Now, I wish you could see all your faces. Is that true, Brett? Did that happen from time to time? Oh, okay. I was told by some of the people in the Corps that they did. You were probably a good Corps guy, a good soldier. Anyway, but here's my point for even saying this, is you can make even something as menial as that something that can be glorifying to God. And you know what it depends on? Your attitude. It all depends on your attitude. Carrying out a task assigned to us is important, but no more than the attitude we have while carrying it out. Now, when I got into sales, I read some books from Zig Ziglar. He's one of the best salesmen I've ever heard of. And I read thoroughly See You at the Top. That was his book. And this is a quote from that book. He said, quote, "It's your attitude, not aptitude, which determines your altitude." In other words, how high you're going to go. It's your attitude, not your aptitude, which determines your altitude. I've had the opportunity to hire people. I've hired people when I was working for someone else, and I hired people when I had my own business. And I came to the conclusion very quickly that when I was interviewing someone for a job, their intelligence and their ability was not even in the same ballpark as their attitude. Their attitude was number one with me, because you can teach someone and train them if they have a good attitude. And if they need to have special training, whatever it is, You can train that. But if they have a bad attitude, that's something that you can't train to get a good attitude. And a bad attitude will sour everything. I just thought of something that happened. As I'm teaching, sometimes a flash will come in, and I'm thinking of it as an illustration. And I think this would be a proper illustration to give you about a poor attitude and how it needs to be changed. I was working at the University of Texas Medical School that's down there in Houston, in the medical center. And at that time, my dad was a foreman there. And we had a guy named, I guess I could say his name. Nobody knows his name. No. His name was Tommy Bua. He was an Italian. And Tommy was a hot Italian. I mean, he was a real jazzy guy. And I always knew if he was on the job or not because this finger was gone. He said he fell off some shelves he was building and it caught this and ripped his finger off. So when he put on cotton gloves and wore them out, he just threw them down. And so when you're walking along and you see an old dirty glove and all the glove was dirty except this one finger and it was perfectly clean, you know where it came from. It was Tommy's glove. Anyway, my dad told Tommy and myself, go get some of these toilets. They're porcelain toilets. They were in boxes, and bring them in here and set them in here. Okay. And so we came in there. I had one on my shoulder. Tommy had one on his. Came in there. And when he put his down, I set mine down. He got about this far and just let it go and hit. And my dad was standing there and you hear clink. And my dad said, is that broken? And Tommy said, I don't know if it's broken. You can always, they'll replace it. That was his attitude. And my dad said, open it. He opened it and it was broken. And when he saw it broken, my dad left. And Tommy said, where'd he go? I said, I don't think you want to know where he's going. He said, what do you mean? I said, he went to get your check. He said, you think he's going to fire me? I said, I know he's going to fire you. And sure enough, he called for his check, and when he came back in, he told Tommy, he says, you can go up to the job shack and wait, your check will be here shortly. And Tommy said, you're going to fire me just for breaking that toilet? And my dad said, no, I'm going to fire you because of your attitude. Now, that's an illustration. But that's not the end of the story. Later on, my dad was on another job, and Tommy came to work for him again, and he was the best worker he had because he learned something about attitude back there when my dad fired him, and he told my dad that was the best thing you could ever do. He said, I was cocky and arrogant. He says, I have a family to feed. And he says, ever since then, he says, I strive to be the best worker on the job and the most humble as well. Now, that's a true story. And I don't know where Tommy is now, but he could attest to it if he was here. So that's one reason I'm saying that attitude is so important. And we have to recognize it's not so much what we do, it's more how we do it. And in the how we do it, connected to that is our attitude, because it's our attitude that's going to determine how we do our job. Whether it's complaining, whether it's grumbling, whether it's you're going to do the best job no matter what it may be. Because if you're a more mature believer, you recognize that we are in the employee of the Most High. And He commands us to do everything that we do as it was being done as unto Him. And that's a big order there. God originated and established work from the very beginning with the first man. Adam was assigned a job even before Eve was taken from his rib. Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. Then the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and keep it. God gave Adam a job to do, not to punish him, but to bless him. It enabled him to experience the satisfaction that comes with accomplishing a task and seeing that his work was well done. After all, we're made in the image of God. Now, God did work in creating the universe, if you want to call it work. He spoke and it was created out of nothing, but then he restored it. And we have that in Genesis chapter 1 and then following into chapter 2. And what did he say after every time that he created something, except once? He said, and God said it was good. And when God is saying that, he's saying essentially, or when he said that, he's essentially saying, I did a good job. It's to esteem something and recognize something that is of value and worth, and doing the best job that you can. Of course, that's not relevant to God, because anything that he does is absolutely perfect. But for us, when you do something and you put your all into it, body, soul, and spirit, blood, sweat, and tears, and when it's done, you can have a sense of pride. Not arrogant pride, but a legitimate pride that you gave it your best and now it is well done. And only work can accomplish that. So when we're talking about business or employment, really we have a lot to say about work. God designed us to be self-sufficient and to provide for our own needs. We are commanded to work to support ourselves. It is a command. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 11 through 12, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life. Boy, I like to live a quiet life. When I was a senior in high school, not so much. For a senior in high school, the last thing they want to do is live a quiet life. But now I very much want to live a quiet life. The less drama and the less I can't say that word. Let's just say that you want to live a quiet life and live it like that. Make it your ambition to lead a quiet life and attend to your own business. In other words, mind your own business and work with your hands. Now, when this was given, most people worked with their hands. They didn't have many machines. They didn't have a computer, and they worked with their hands. But you know what? Just because you work with your hands does not exclude working with your mind, working with your intelligence. Today we are so arrogantly sophisticated that we think that anybody that works with their hands is kind of a blue-collar second-class citizen, and nothing could be further from the truth. I went through 3.5 years of apprenticeship school because I had so much experience. My dad, my granddad, and my uncle were all plumbers. I knew more than, probably all I needed was 1 year, but they gave me 3. I got half a year's credit for the experience that I already had. But listen, you have to know a lot. For instance, I was going to plumber's apprenticeship school. And most people think, oh, well, what do plumbers do? They go out there and unstop sewers. Have no idea that in these great big sky-rise buildings, there are all kinds of systems, mechanical systems. And if you are, when you go through that apprenticeship school and you say you graduate and you are a plumber, what it means is that you can do any kind of plumbing there is. And I told you earlier about the University of Texas Medical School. That was a challenge. That was my first job that I was doing all the drawing, making shop drawings and coordinating the architectural and the electrical and the mechanical and the all these. There's about 6 or 7 different blueprints for each trade, and you only have so much space. And these architects don't really care about. They'll try to put 10 pounds of soap suds in a 5-pound bag. In other words, there's not room enough for it all, and you run into each other, and you have to have people that understand how to read these blueprints and what the code is, what you can and cannot do, and then coordinate with all these different crafts. Now, the ceiling at that University Medical School is, I don't know, it's probably 8 or 10 feet high, something like that. But there's another 12 feet above that is ductwork and fire lines and AC, air conditioning lines, downspouts. For the plumber, they had cast iron pipe, they had dur iron, they had steel pipe, they had glass pipe, they had copper pipe, they had, let's see, there's one or two others. Yeah, galvanized, and the steel pipe. And each one of those have to be, you have to know how to work. You thread one pipe, you caulk another pipe. Some of them have a victrolic couplings. Anyway, a glass pipe. Oh, I didn't say glass. They had glass pipe. And it's really interesting on glass pipe, how do you put it together? You put it on rollers and you have a heater and you spin it and it puts a little ridge on the end, and you have certain couplers to put in that. What I'm saying is, if you're a plumber and you go to that job and they say, we're going to put you on the glass pipe, and you do that, you have to know how to do every bit of it. You understand what I'm saying? You have to know a tremendous amount. At least you used to have to. I don't know what they do now. Now most of it's plastic pipe. Didn't even have plastic pipe when I was doing that. Had all these other kinds. And you had to know the code. You had to do all these things. And yet you were working with your hands. But my whole point was you had to have a tremendous amount of knowledge about all these different kinds of pipes. You had to know how to put them together. You had to know all the different fittings. You know, when you put a high-rise building, they have what they call sleeves. They put a hole in the concrete. You put a sleeve, which is like a can there. They pour the concrete. You knock the can out, and then the pipe goes through it. I can't even begin to tell you what all you have to know. And so when it says that you have to work with your hands, that does not doesn't do away with how much you have to know to work with your hands. And some people work with their hands, and they can create, they're very artistic, and they can create these beautiful things. Here we have Sydney here tonight. I watched her when we were doing the nursery, and what she could do with her hands and with a brush is amazing. I couldn't do that if I tried. If you said, we're going to send you to the guillotine if you don't go in there and paint some of those little animals and the ark like Sydney did, I'd say, well, get that thing out and let's go, because I couldn't do it if my life depended on it. And God has given certain people gifts to work with their hands. The reason I'm saying this is because today so many people just work with the computers. Of course, you have to type certain things. But working with your hands is not something to dismiss as if it doesn't. It's something an underling does. Quite the opposite. And it does not mean that here either. And we have a lot of people today, especially, and I'm not trying to pick on the younger people, but they haven't been trained how to work with their hands other than the thumbs. This deal here. They're thumb experts. But when you get them out there, I want you to go out there and rake that yard. What's a rake? What kind of rake? I mean, they don't. Anyway, now I made all the young people mad at me. So working with your hands, just as we commanded you, so that you may behave properly towards outsiders and not be in any need. God expects us to work. He gave us these hands. He gives us a mind, and He says, get out there and take care of business. Provide for yourself and your family. In fact, do it in such a way that you're going to have such an excess that you are able to be generous to other people. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 28. Let him who steals steal no longer, but rather let him labor, performing with his own hands. There we have the hands again. Performing with his own hands what is good, in order that he may have something to share with him who has need. So that's what I was talking about. We should be so proficient in working with our hands and providing for ourselves, our family, and so forth, that we have something to share with others. You know, hands are a little bit like a hammer. Not in the way they look or anything, but a hammer can be used to build and construct and have a place for people to get in out of the elements. But a hammer can also be used in a destructive way. I've seen on video where criminals use a hammer to break in through the glass door and go into a jewelry store and take a hammer and break all the glass and get all the jewelry. So, and it's the same thing with hands. You can use your hands to work, obey God, and to provide for yourself. And when you do that, you have a sense of worth, a sense of pride, which is not accomplished any other way. And we're commanded to do it, and we're to do it as unto the Lord. So work is a blessing, not a punishment. I think if you're a parent, sometimes the parents say, okay, you were bad today, go out there and pull all those weeds. Well, I don't know. I pulled a lot of weeds in my time. And it's hard to have a good attitude when you're pulling weeds in the summer in black gumbo. Have you ever done that? It's like trying to pull them out of concrete. Psalm 128:2, when you shall eat of the fruit of your hands, there's the hands again, you will be happy and it will be well with you. Ecclesiastes 2:24, there's nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and tell himself that his labor is good. This also I have seen, that it is from the hand of God. And you see the play on words there? Talking about to tell himself that his labor is good. This is also, I have seen, that is from the hand of God. So we shouldn't dread work. In fact, in our country today, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who are out of work and they're looking for work. And I think one reason that we don't have the work that we could have is because of the people's attitude. Mainly their attitude towards God. There are people who are physically unable to work, and they should be supported by family, friends, the church, and charitable organizations. Now, when I wrote Tolerating Tyranny, I had I don't know if it's a whole chapter, but I had a part of it that was saying that we are so used to the government doing so much, we expect the government to do so much, that we think that there's no other way to do it. But you don't have to go back that long to see that there was a time when government wasn't expected to come in and do the things that we can do for ourselves. How long has FEMA been in existence? I don't know, 20 years, maybe? Something like that, maybe a little more. I wouldn't say probably 20, 25 years, something like that maybe. Well, what did they do before then? I mean, oh my gosh, what can we do? Because if we don't have FEMA and we don't have the government shelling out hundreds of billions of dollars every time we have a storm or a fire or an earthquake or hurricanes or whatever it may be, we just can't make it. Well, Harvey kind of showed a little different flavor in that, didn't he? Because you had Texans. Texans are noted for being self-reliant and helping their neighbor. Now, surely the Coast Guard and the first responders, they're a help, but that's their job. I mean, they're paid to do that. And I'm not saying we should get rid of our fire department or our police departments and try to provide security and go out and fight fires, but we do to some extent anyway. A lot of neighborhoods have their own security, and there's a lot of, especially in the rural area like we live in, there's a lot of volunteer fire departments, and that's how it's done. That's how it has been done. So, and the Bible commands us to do that. Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 11. For the poor will never cease to be in the land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall freely open your hand to your brother, to the needy and poor in your land. This is the charitable heart that every person, and even double for believers, should have. Proverbs 28:27. He who gives to the poor will never want, but he who shuts his eyes will have many curses. So you may think, well, and I've heard it said, these people have built on the side of a cliff, and it's a crazy place to build, and then something happens and their house falls and the government comes in and rebuilds it for them. I don't think the government should come in and be doing any of that. It's not constitutional. They don't have a constitutional right to do it. And when they do it, the only way that they can do it is, well, two ways. They can either borrow the money, putting us all of our heads in a noose, especially the young people of the future generations, or they can take it from those by force and give it to others. And the Constitution doesn't allow that, and I don't think the Bible does either. He's talking, he who gives to the poor. He's talking about the Israelites. This is Solomon wrote this. And I think that's the way it ought to be. But I would be drowned out with a bunch of boos and mocking even to suggest it in our day, because so many people think that we cannot survive without government help. And it's been my opinion from just watching what government does that it doesn't do anything very good. And it's very expensive. And since there's no competition, it always grows, it gets bigger. And then there is fraud and there's graft and all the other things that you don't have when people are right on top of a situation. They know who's going to try to gain the system, trying to have fraud and so forth. This is the last verse we're going to do tonight. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17 through 18. Instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited, or to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches, because they are certainly uncertain, but on God, who richly supplies us with things to enjoy. Instruct them to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share. That should be the attitude. And it appears, when I was telling about these two hurricanes that we've had recently, one of the good things is there are abundant number of people who have this attitude. Like Cajun Navy, and coming from all over Texas in those flat bottom boats rescuing people. Nobody paid them to do that. And a lot, it's hard. That's hard work. And they got thirsty, and they were hungry, and they were sleepy, and they were tired. They did it because they wanted to be good citizens, a lot of them. But believers had a higher calling. They recognized that they were required to have that. God doesn't give us the option, if you want to do these things and have a bad attitude, then I'm going to bless you for it. Not only are we to do what is good, but more importantly, we are to do it with the right attitude. And so many times, the only way that we're going to have the right attitude is to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And when we do that, it's divine good, and it lasts forever. It lasts forever in the sense that God has promised to reward us. Now, I'm not going to do it tonight because I'm out of time, but you see these two scriptures here? I'm going to connect them to this verse next time. Hebrews 10, 35 through 36, and Hebrews chapter 6, verse 9. What did I say, Corinthians? I don't know, Galatians. Galatians 6, 9. Both of those can be connected to this, to be rich in good works. Both of them have to do with works. Hebrews 10, verse 35, I'll give you a hint. It says, don't cast away your confidence, for it has great reward. You know what that confidence is talking about? The confidence that when you do a good work, that God notices and He doesn't forget. And if it is done in the Holy Spirit, then there might be rewards for you. So don't lose that confidence that that's taking place. Don't think you're doing it, nobody notices, and you just get discouraged. Let's close. Father, thank you for this time that we have to go over these, ending up the spiritual health and recognizing how vigilant we have to be in order to maintain that. And then as we get into employment and this business, we need to carry on our business with the right attitude, or it doesn't matter what we do, but it does matter how we do it. And how we do it is with the right attitude and doing it unto you. We pray that you will help us to remember these things as we wake up tomorrow morning and the next day and the next and the next, because we're going to fortify what we learn here with more doctrine. We thank you for this and pray it in Christ's name. Amen.